Story 1. When I think of Canada, I think of my buddy George. He was an engineer I worked with at a construction company during COVID. Most of the guys disliked him because they thought he was arrogant. He was actually just socially awkward and very intelligent. I was his laborer and operator, and he was the design engineer. He would come up with innovative improvements, and the other blue-collar workers would criticize him and refuse to try to implement them. I was the only one who supported his ideas and helped him refine the processes so they could actually work. Many of his ideas were ambitious, but we made most of them work. Our typical conversation went something like this. George, hey, Anon, check out this design. What do you think? Me, sounds unlikely, Georgie, but let's try it. We learned to work together and became one of the most successful teams on site. I missed that guy. He had a bunch of Bitcoin and decided to cash some out and move back to Canada when its value boomed. Story 2. Glad I live in Canada. Can get expensive sometimes, and it has its own problems. But many of those issues are relatively minor compared to problems people have in other countries. Story 3. I am so thankful that I live in Canada. It is expensive, and I wish I had the disposable income that my parents had, but ultimately I would not want to be anywhere else. Story 4. I love it. Beautiful country from coast to coast, friendly people, and the social democracy works well for the most part. Not without need for improvement, but overall I give living here a good grade. Story 5. As a teenager, I used to go on bus trips to see the New York Rangers play the Montreal Canadiens at the Forum. I thought the Montreal fans were extremely nice. I liked the city because there were many good places to eat. Now I cannot afford the United States cost for a couple of my medications, so I order from Canada and save a lot. They are really kind and helpful, much more than my local pharmacy. The only side effect of Canadian pills is that I have an incredible urge to play hockey. Story 6. As an American, I think they got robbed and should have advanced in the Gold Cup. Neil Peart is a personal hero of mine. You all managed to produce a lot of solid comedians. Story 7. Wish I could emigrate. I live on the border of the United States and Canada and listen to Canadian Broadcasting Corporation radio all the time in my car. 9 miles away, and it might as well be 1,000. Happy Canada Day, my friends. Story 8. Canada is quite similar to New Zealand in terms of culture. We also have a large country that thinks it is cooler than us. Additionally, maple syrup is excellent. Story 9. Happy to be here as a born and raised Canadian. Yes, things are difficult off and on, but overall, considering the state of the world and the challenges we have recently faced as a country, I am very proud to be Canadian. We are consistently a stable and aware nation population-wise, regardless of what we periodically have to deal with. I am proud to be born and raised here. The core of our population bands together nationally when needed, setting aside political and provincial differences, and I appreciate that solidarity. Story 10. What comes to mind when I think of Canada? John Candy and Dan Aykroyd in the movie The Great Outdoors. Story 11. My son went to college at McGill University in Montreal. He received a first-class education in a world-class city for the price of a state college in the United States. We spent many wonderful weekends visiting him. I love Canada. Montreal is a magical city, and every trip there was an adventure. Story 12. I am American by birth, but I was lucky enough to have been partly raised in Calgary. I miss my adopted home very much. I wish I could go back. God keep that land glorious and free. Oh Canada, I would, in fact, stand on guard for you. Story 13. When I look at the chaotic situation down south, I thank my lucky stars. When I think of our country, I think of our fundamental decency as a people, kindness but not weakness. Story 14. I just moved here in May on a work permit. I am currently living in a remote part of interior British Columbia on a ranch. I absolutely love it here and never want to leave. Story 15. I loved the Canadian rock bands of my teenage years in the late 1970s and 1980s, including Rush, Triumph, April Wine, and Loverboy. I even had a Canadian flag hanging in my room in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. Story 16. I'm grateful that this country welcomed us. We have built a life here. I fully understand that there are issues, and not everyone is doing well, but we try to give back. I love nature here and do my best to respect it. Story 17, two things. The time I spent hitchhiking across Canada in 2012, meeting many amazing people and seeing beautiful landscapes. I have since hitchhiked in the United States, New Zealand, Australia, Hungary, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Bulgaria, but I still consider Canada the only other place I would consider moving to. I am Dutch, by the way, which leads to the second point, the liberation of the Netherlands, made possible by the sacrifices of many Canadian lives. We will never forget. Story 18, with every fiber of my being, I think it is the greatest place on earth. It definitely has its flaws, every place does, but there is absolutely nowhere else I would rather live. Greatest country in the world. Story 19. Proud of you, Canada, for standing your ground and not letting the aggressive neighbor invade your property. We see you, Canada, and we appreciate what you stand for. Happy birthday and keep up the good work. Story 20. When I think of Canada right now, I feel that the future is daunting, and I feel pretty hollow. I think that's the best word. I love the people in my country for who we are and the things we believe, but I hate how willing we are to ignore our problems because it's worse somewhere else. I'm guilty of it too at times. I'm constantly infuriated by our societal desire to keep moving and not make a big deal of problematic things. Our values as a group, that we should all have safety, community, and equal opportunity, are constantly reflected in the words of every Canadian I find around the world. But our institutions at home don't make this a reality. Feels like a sham. It hurts. It feels so unfriendly, so un-Canadian. And every day I feel and hear this echoed around me by others in ways that make the low hum of it rumble in my chest. I hope we can keep talking about it because this is how change starts. The move towards responsibility for our history, for each other, and for ensuring our leaders and institutions reflect our beliefs and address our needs. I truly believe that we have the ability to flourish in this next chapter of our history, but we have to keep moving toward our warmth, and we have to start being responsible for our impacts and what we are willing to turn a blind eye to. We are a resilient, creative, loving people. We just have to remember that survival isn't all there is. How we live every day and what we support is just as much a part of us as what we hope and dream for those around us. All the best, my fellow Canadians and members of the world. I hope I feel more like celebrating my country next year. This year, I just didn't feel I could. There hasn't been much to celebrate, and there has been so much pain not atoned for. If anyone has embraced these feelings, I would love to hear. I'm still trying to find how to use them myself, so I am open to suggestions. I'd love to find a way to celebrate the place and the people I love while also doing better myself. All the best, everyone. Story 21. I am very glad I immigrated to Canada 30 years ago. I am very proud to be a Canadian. Canada is one of the best countries in the world in many ways. Story 22. I can't imagine what my life would be like without Canada. Literally. I am a first-generation immigrant who came here on a study visa and liked it too much to leave. I finally became a citizen last year after over 10 years of school and working. I could never imagine what life would be like without ever coming here. Story 23. David Cronenberg. The cast of Second City Television. Rush, Margaret Atwood, Keanu Reeves, Neil Young, William Shatner, Maud Lewis, Mordecai Richler, Glenn Gould, Emily Carr, The Tragically Hip, Strombo, The Sadies, Christopher Plummer, Michael G. Fox, Dead on Arrival, Cardinal Official. Story 24. I am grateful to live in a free and peaceful place. It is not without its issues, and I do recognize my privilege, but I am grateful. Story 25. Driven across Canada from coast to coast. Grew up in Ontario and have lived on both the east and west coasts. Canada is beautiful, but the west coast is absolutely the best coast. You cannot beat the beauty of the Rocky Mountains, palm trees, Tofino beaches, and more. Story 26. We have our problems when it comes to history and how we treat Indigenous people. However, I am very grateful to be Canadian. We still have issues with healthcare, politics, housing, and so on. but I would much rather be here than in most places in the world. We live in a beautiful country and have many wonderful people. Story 27. I love it. Sure, it has its flaws, but it is an amazing country with a rich history and diverse cultures. Story 28. Breathtaking nature and polite people. I am an Australian who spent 2 years in the Rocky Mountains, and the thought of Canada will always warm my heart. I still remember waking up after the first true snowfall and being amazed that people just kept living their lives in 2 feet of snow. Story 29. Canada. That is my friend up there. If you have a problem with him, you have a problem with me. I suggest you let that one marinate. Story 30. When I struggled with my visa in the United States, Canada accepted me. Canada is home, and I am a proud Canadian. I feel proud of Canada. We do not interfere with others. We open our doors to people in need. We helped Ukraine. We are a strong ally and dependable. Story 31. After seeing what the rest of the world is like, specifically our neighbors to the south, I have never been more proud. We have our own problems like anyone else, but we pull through when it really counts. Story 32. I am so thankful I live in Canada. I emigrated here 5 years ago, and I do not regret it one bit. Even with money being tight, I cannot think of anywhere else to raise my children. Happy Canada Day to you all. Story 33. Canada is about as good a neighbor as the United States could reasonably expect. When I think of it, I tend to think of snow, hockey, maple syrup, Tim Hortons, kids in the hall, Toronto, Vancouver, Mounties, Quebec, and stunning landscapes. Story 34. I love it here. Granted, I have not really been to many other places, but I do love my country. My province is absolutely gorgeous and has some of the best fly fishing in the world, but it also has its share of issues. I will always be Canadian, no matter what the loud minority here wants. Story 35. I've spent the past week in Newfoundland. This place is an undiscovered gem. Incredibly beautiful coastlines, interesting wildlife, remarkably friendly people, and a culture that is a mix of Canadian and Irish. Many small towns and villages are still trying to recover from the cod moratorium, so it is still rough around the edges, but tourism is on the rise, leading to growth in some areas. If you enjoy the outdoors and want to experience authentic maritime Canadian culture, come visit Newfoundland. Story 36. I think of Joyce Echaquin, a Canadian Indigenous woman who was mocked and neglected by hospital staff during a medical emergency she experienced in 2020. Racism and prejudice directly contributed to her death. We have the same problems in the United States. Do not forget Joyce Echaquin. Story 37. I love Canada, but one thing that makes me think a lot is the missed opportunities. This country has so much potential in almost everything. Plenty of resources and nice people. We should have been leading the world in almost every aspect, but I do not know, it just does not work lately. Story 38. Born and raised here, there are some irritating things, but nowhere I would rather be. I find this is more and more of a luxury these days, but I feel safe in Canada wherever I go. Story 39. Canada has its problems, but what country does not? I am thankful that my parents made it here over their other options. Story 40. Coming from the Detroit metropolitan area, Canada is a place where you have to talk to police to go there. They have slightly different accents than us, enjoy politics and a social safety net, but are vulnerable to the same kinds of capitalist corporate greed we are, such as the housing crisis. They treat Indigenous people worse than the United States, which is concerning. However, they are peaceful and friendly, and some speak French, which is interesting. I am a hockey fan, so I can sing their national anthem. They do a great job of accepting refugees and immigrants. I also admire that they have their own entertainment media, much of which is good. I like that they celebrate their own culture and do their own thing. Their comedians are amazing. I appreciate when they stand up for themselves. Additionally, they observe the 4th of July and Thanksgiving early, and they have Boxing Day, which I wish we had. Story 41. I was born in Canada in the 1980s, and I have seen us change so much. I am proud of who we are today. While we still have a long way to go, the way we acknowledge and work with First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis people is vastly different than when I was young. I know there is a long way to go, but I am proud of the small steps we have taken, and it gives me hope that we will keep coming together. I am proud that we have opened our doors to welcome the world. I know there are growing pains, but I am deeply proud that people want to call Canada home. COVID-19 was truly an unprecedented time, and we weathered it fairly well. We learned a lot that will help us in the future. We economically handled the 2008 financial collapse pretty well compared to other countries. I have faith and hope that we will get through the housing crisis as well. I am proud of us all. I am late to the thread, but I wanted to share anyway. Story 42. 6 years in Canada. A citizen now. I own a house with a mortgage, and I have a backyard where I see bears and birds. I walk to a river every day with my dog. I get to see mountains every day. I breathe the freshest air and eat the nicest foods. I say hi to at least 10 people every day that I don't know. I do things that I never grew up doing and that I have now grown to love. Canada took away my depression and my horrible health issues. It gave me the space and time to enjoy my hobbies and learn more. I meet people from many different cultures. I love this place and feel more patriotic about Canada than I did about my home country. It has given me so much. I am so proud to be a Canadian. Story 43. I am American. When I think of Canada, I think of when my cousin and my wife had a baby around the same time. My wife had to clock in at work as soon as the umbilical cord was cut, and my cousin had paid parental leave for an extended period. Also, poutine and hockey. Story 44. It was yesterday. What comes to mind? Greatest country in North America and contender for the greatest country in the world to live in. Story 45. I love Canada. Beautiful country, nice people, good food, good beer, lots of culture. I wish the United States was more like Canada in many ways, but clearly we are heading in a very different direction. They also do not deserve the unfair treatment they are receiving from the United States government right now. They are our neighbors and allies, and they deserve better. I know it is no longer Canada Day, but I just saw this post, so happy Canada Day. Story 46. It is home in the best sense of the word. A place where you know you belong with people who love you, where you are safe and content knowing it is where you belong. Story 47. I feel really lucky to have been born here. I would never want to leave. There is so much natural beauty here. Story 48. Like many people have said, Canada is flawed, but it is a great country. I would like to leave Quebec and visit some of the other provinces sometime. Story 49. Ever since I was 6 years old in school, they talked about how Canada is a melting pot, and I have always felt that way. I am supportive of immigration and appreciate our neighbors. I dislike when people complain about it because we are blessed here. I want more people to experience our kindness and the beauty of our scenery. I will never live in another country. Story 50. Le Canada est un pays riche avec beaucoup d'histoire et bien sûr, il est bilingue au niveau national. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a 2 langues officielles qui sont parlées au Canada. Je pense qu'ils sont les plus grands producteurs de sirop d'érable dans le monde. Story 51. My husband's friend drew furry artwork and sold her art online. She met a furry character online and they fell in love. The man turned out to be wealthy, like owning private jets wealthy. He lived in Canada, so she moved there to be with him. She is the first person that comes to my mind. Story 52. South Park Canada's Pac-Man head saying buddy, guy, and friend, and wondering what all the fuss is about. Story 53. I am a 10th generation French Canadian on one side. On the other, my great-grandmother survived state-sponsored massacres that killed several members of her family and escaped to Canada. I am grateful to be here. Story 54. As I recently came across a short video on YouTube highlighting some of Canada's war crimes in World War I think you better not mess with Canada. Story 55. Happy Canada Day. I am from the Pacific Northwest. I love Canadians. Everyone I know loves Canadians. My dad used to call the Northwest Baja Canada. Story 56. My insurance, property tax, mortgage, all types of groceries, power bill, car payment, and internet have all increased significantly in recent years, yet wages have barely changed. I might lose my home if things get worse. I paid $8 for a jar of peanut butter for the kids yesterday. The idea of eating out, taking the children to the movie theater, or extra activities is a distant memory, And this is all while working 2 jobs just to survive. Yes, happy Canada Day. Story 57. As an American, I think of the wonderful senior trip I took to British Columbia. I got to try amazing chocolate, eat fresh maple syrup, go swimming in the bay in Victoria, try Nanaimo bars, and see wild orcas. It was a wonderful trip, and yes, it was touristy but lovely nonetheless. I really hope I get to visit again. Story 58. I have never been more thankful and happy to live in Canada. We are ranked 8th as the best country to live in the world. It is a powerful passport to have, and I am glad we have a new leader who is not irrational. Story 59. It makes me want to wear orange, to be honest. We are on stolen land and we have politicians who do not care to acknowledge it at all. I do not know, man. Story 60. As a Dutch person, I love Canada, and Canadian people seem very friendly, like better versions of Americans. My cousins live in Canada. My grandmother used to go there a lot. I looked at her Canada photo albums all the time. Story 61. Massive space, numerous different ecosystems, almost unlimited natural resources, and it is completely mismanaged. The gap between the wealthy and the poor will grow exponentially by the end of this century. Story 62. Born and raised in Canada but have lived in the United States of America for nearly 2/3 of my life. I have become more proud of being a Canadian as I get older. I have spent Canada Day in Canada as many times as possible. I am writing this post from St. John's. Story 63. I met a Canadian in Australia who used to pack all our cones with a tobacco and cannabis mix. He told us his family has maple trees on their property and they make maple syrup. He explained how the sap is reduced by boiling it until it becomes the thickened syrup we all know and love. While it boils in the vat, it makes a bubbly froth that would overflow. To prevent that, they hang a piece of bacon above the maple syrup vat. When the syrup froth touches the bacon, the fat changes the surface tension and pops the bubbles in the froth, preventing overflow. I think about that piece of bacon often. Story 64. My nemesis. I am British and met a Canadian who dared to challenge me in being polite. Tea was served, cakes were offered. I did everything to show him how little he truly knew about manners, but he was a perfect house guest. 10 out of 10 would do again. Story 65. I am from Trumpiston, but I love Canada and Canadians. I have visited all the provinces and am now working on the territories. Story 66. I started the process of moving to Canada after the 2020 United States election. I had a bad feeling things were going to start swinging in a bad direction, and as a very outspoken autistic transgender person, I felt I would have a better life in Canada. I moved to Toronto in 2021, and my life has improved dramatically. Yes, it is expensive. Yes, it has many of its own problems. But I am so glad I came here. The life I have built here is more than I could have ever imagined for myself. Story 67. I love this country, especially for its landscape, climate, and wildlife. I know we have problems here, and many of them bother me. Most are the fault of my provincial government, but that does not mean our federal government could not do better. They are doing all right for now, but there is always room for improvement. I have many issues with my province in particular. I dislike our provincial government. I do not understand how our premier was re-elected last year. He is the opposite of what our province needs, and given his delayed wildfire response, I doubt he really cares about it. This country is my home. Despite its problems, I love it and want to see it become a better nation. The only reason I would leave is if this country can no longer provide an okay and relatively safe life for me. Story 68. I enjoyed visiting British Columbia for the first time on Canada Day a few years ago. Felt very natural and was beautiful. There were lots of nice people. Cannot wait to go back. Story 69. As a country, we have our strengths and weaknesses. But would I live anywhere else? No. I have lived in Europe and enjoyed it. But I love our country and the people here. I have lived in 4 provinces and 12 cities. Each one has something great to offer, whether it is the food, the environment, or the culture. Yes, Canada does have culture. So please get out there and enjoy whichever part of this country you are in. and go visit the areas you have not been to yet. Story 70. I love Canada. What comes to mind? Civility, welcome, beauty, good people, respect, Timbits. Please accept the heartfelt apologies offered by the majority of your southern neighbors. Story 71. I see us as one of the last bastions of democracy. I am concerned about the polarization that happens even in Canada nowadays. I am not sure what Canada is right now, and I do not know where it is heading. Being an immigrant nation, every 10 years it feels like a new country. I have lived in different countries and am happy to have grown up in Canada. Story 72. I love this country. It has its issues, but which country does not? I am sure they will be fixed, and other issues will replace them at some point. It is still one of the best countries in the world, with some of the most amazing, kind, and helpful people. I never really had a country growing up, but Canada and Canadians accepted me with open arms. I love this country and feel very proud to call it home. I feel a deep sense of gratitude towards this country and immeasurable joy knowing my children will grow up here. Story 73. I'm glad to be Canada's neighbor. I've lived there during every visit, and some of my dearest friends are Canadian. My first thought is that you have a strategic maple syrup reserve. Story 74. I love being Canadian. We immigrated here decades ago and were naturalized as citizens. I have lived in many countries and traveled to even more, and none of them can compare to Canada. Canada is built differently. From its multiculturalism to its justice system and infrastructure, it cannot be beat. It is not perfect by any stretch, but it is better than 99% of the places I have seen. Story 75. In this turbulent and uncertain world, Canada stands out clearly as the last outpost of civilization. Story 76. What do I think of Canada? It is pretty cool since it gave us Brett the Hitman Hart. And what comes to my mind when I think of Canada? Dudley Do Right. Story 77. Love Canada. However, all I can think about now is the horrific state of healthcare. How we are not filling the streets with protests about the state of healthcare is beyond me. People need to understand the seriousness of this issue and respond accordingly. At this point, it is no longer about voting. Edit. People seem unhappy about my comment. I am chronically ill and have shared my story in the comments. Feel free to read. Story 78. Feeling very mixed on Canada Day this year. There is a lot to like about our country. Montreal, for example, is a beautiful city, and we have vast swathes of beautiful wilderness. People are at times generous and kind, but the last few years have been very dismaying. The Premier of Ontario is wildly corrupt and has, among other things, been pawning off public lands, gutting healthcare and education, and reducing environmental protection while enjoying sustained support. Our infrastructure is ailing, and our housing is wildly expensive due to car dependence and housing speculation. Every day I live near Hamilton and work in downtown Toronto. So many issues are set in stark relief, especially homelessness and crumbling roads and infrastructure. We are a country of great potential. We once had a world-leading vaccine research organization, sold off for spare parts. We once had a world-leading bridge design department at the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, gutted by Mike Harris. We once invested in public lands and public housing but essentially have not built public housing in 40 years. We also once had a fantastic railway system, since sold to Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Railway, and have since impeded public investments in passenger rail. It sometimes feels that we are a country that dreams of nothing except not being the United States, and that is a shame. Story 79. When I went to Niagara Falls, the Canadian side was much better than the American side. We did not cross the border, but I thought it looked far better on that side. Story 80. Very proud to be Canadian. I am married to an American who just obtained his Canadian citizenship last year, so I have seen both sides of the coin. Both of us agree we never want to live in the United States. Story 81. Leaf. It is in the flag and also red. Maple syrup follows because of the leaf. Then my mind wanders to sweetness. Story 82. I'm British. The first thing that comes to mind is amazing scenery and Wales. My mum always wanted to visit Canada for this reason but never got the chance. Culturally, I think we are similar in many respects, and Canadians are viewed as good people, although I haven't met many myself. I hope you are having a great Canada Day, and I would love to one day visit this amazing country. Story 83. Never more proud to be Canadian. Do we have issues? Of course. It would be ridiculous to say that no country has issues. I am a second-generation Canadian and thank my grandparents for taking the chance to start a new life here. Story 84. Canada has its own problems and is not perfect, but I have always loved going there and the people I have met. Story 85. I grew up in the English-speaking part of Quebec and was so traumatized that I fled to the United States of America. I love Canada, but I absolutely loathe Quebec. Story 86. So much better to be a Canadian than one of those who live south of the border, that is for sure. Story 87. Beautiful people, beautiful country, and my great-grandparents were born there, so I feel you. Happy Canada Day and stay cool, Canada. Story 88. The Canadian people are warm and welcoming. I have visited twice and loved the place. As a lost person in a train station, people immediately approached me to help because I looked lost and confused. Story 89. I have been a resident of Michigan since I was 14 years old, a very long time ago, and I have developed a kinship with our Canadian neighbors during that time. I have spent time with many Canadians and enjoyed every experience. I have nothing but love for our northern neighbors. Story 90. The first thing that comes to mind is your epic fail to pixelate the Canadian flag at the Pixel event. It was hilarious. Story 91. That one house in the neighborhood where the mom is a retired professor and the dad is an accountant or healthcare provider, the whole family helps out at school and in the neighborhood. They are generally sane and pleasant people. They have some odd yet familiar and exceptionally filling family dinners. But when they invite you over, they are always good and polite. Then you go home, look at your own family that is a mess, and wish you could live in their house. Story 92. Happy Canada Day from the United States. I think about a trip we took to Calgary and then west. So much natural beauty. The people were all friendly too. Our campgrounds had been relatively empty until suddenly, on Canada Day, everyone was there grilling and hanging out. Story 93. You are home to some of my favorite musicians and actors. Stay focused, team. By the way, will you be accepting American refugees in the future? Asking for a friend. Story 94. I am Australian and was married to a Canadian. I love Canada and think of it as a grown-up version of Australia. Story 95. I have never been very patriotic, but since this conflict with the fascists down south, I have discovered my country and am very proud of it. Story 96. Canadian expatriate here. I had to leave to find a decent job and am now searching for jobs in Canada. There are still fewer than a page of jobs matching my skills and experience. Story 97. Happy to live in a great country that is truly free. We have flaws and much work to do to ensure everyone benefits from society and the economy, but we acknowledge that and are willing to do the work. Story 98. The government supporting the kidnapping and indoctrination of Indigenous children into Christian churches up until 1999 really soured my view of Canada. I am not saying the United States is much better, but that would be like if desegregation did not happen until 1999. Story 99. How I feel about Canada. Great nation and great people. What comes to mind when thinking about Canada? The television show Flashpoint. Story 100. I've yet to meet an unpleasant Canadian, both outside of Canada and during the one and only time I visited. I'm sure they exist, but Canada's reputation for being a friendly and polite country is well earned. The only time I visited was 2 weeks ago when my mother died and I was transiting through Canada. You made an unpleasant trip bearable. Story 101. I love Canada and feel terrible that Donnie Darko has damaged the relationship between the United States and Canada. Story 102. I am from the deep south in the United States and I just got back from Calgary. I loved it. Everyone was very nice. The food was good. The candy was wonderful, and I had a great time shopping. I am a fan of our brothers to the north. Story 103. We are not the good guys the world thinks we are. On the other hand, we are also not bad guys. We have a troubled past that we do not hide. We wear it on our sleeves to remain humble and aware. We have made mistakes and actively try to avoid repeating them. Our country grew to where it is not by hiding problems but by acknowledging our own flaws and strengthening ourselves because of them. We have taken accountability. We are not perfect and we are aware of it. However, we will continue to try. Story 104. I love Canada and the Canadians I have met. I visited often with my family when I was young. One childhood visit to the amazing Ontario Science Museum literally changed our lives. After seeing an exhibit showing the damage done to smokers' lungs, both my parents quit smoking. I grew up listening to Canadian radio stations and eventually worked for a couple of years in Toronto. Great country, nice people, and wonderful neighbors. As an American citizen, I am ashamed of how we have behaved towards you in the past several months. Happy Canada Day. Story 105. One of you stole my friend's laptop about 20 years ago. At the time, he was a poor graduate student and went there for a visit. Someone stole his laptop. They were not his friend. Story 106. Damn proud of our Canadian heritage. Looking at the celebrations from coast to coast to coast. Ryan and Scott received the Order of Canada, and Prince Edward and Daryl Fox are cycling across Canada to carry on his brother Terry's dream. The only thing I missed was Blue Rodeo in Charlottetown. I thought the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation was going to show them. My sister is a huge fan, and I wanted to have my sibling rivalry told you so moment, but it didn't happen. They were broadcasting from Prince Edward Island in the morning, so I thought we would see the performance when the time came. Not at all. As a Canadian, I am grateful to be born on this side of the 49th parallel, where the fabric of our country is full of rights, freedoms, and multiculturalism, unlike what the people south of the border are experiencing. I love the people, but as long as the other person is at the helm, it is elbows up. I am not backing down to derogatory rhetoric, ongoing threats, and alternative facts. Happy 158th Canada. Story 107. Gone off track. Losing its identity. Kind of becoming terrible. Hopefully, we do not get as bad as the United Kingdom, but that is where we are headed. Story 108. I am proud to be Canadian and aware of the privilege it is to be born here. I am also proud to be from a country that I can openly critique, disagree with, and challenge to become better. I would not want to be from anywhere else, but I also want our country to improve and to fight against systemic racism and prejudice. I love my country enough to fight for that. Story 109. I think of Canada as a warm, welcoming country where I wish I could live. I am now trapped in the difficult situation of the United States of America. Every day here begins with a new cycle of troubling news that I never thought I would see in this country. How did we get here? I wish I could move north. Story 110. There are strong rumors that Elon Musk might be deported from the United States by Donald Trump, possibly to Canada. Wishing him a speedy recovery. Story 111. United States citizen here. I have had a lifelong love affair with Canada. First real vacation to Quebec City from New York City area truly felt like another world. Honeymoon in the Maritime Provinces and Toronto. I have visited most other parts of Canada and have never failed to have a great time. Story 112. Canada has never done anything to me, so why should I speak negatively about Canada? Canada is great in my opinion. Story 113. I grew up here and the day is just another day for me, but mainly National Hockey League Free Agent Day. I only get excited about Canada when we play as Team Canada in hockey, and only at the Olympics for Nations or World Cups. Story 114. I live on the United States side in a border city. Canadians are my brothers and sisters. I see their flag daily and think of them often. I consider myself Canadian light. I have been there enough and have some of their mannerisms. I love Canada. Story 115. Answering this the day after Canada Day, in the hospital as my husband is having day surgery. I have my Tim Hortons coffee, sitting with other families waiting for their loved ones. Feeling very patriotic. Story 116. We are not perfect, but I absolutely love being Canadian. I am so grateful to be a citizen of this beautiful country, and I am incredibly grateful to my grandparents for being courageous enough to leave Europe, specifically Croatia and Poland, and come here looking for a better life, which they found. This country is my home and my heart. Story 117. Love our historical centennial and socialist values. We want to continue spreading awareness about the evils of conservatism and ensure that we remain a true democracy. Story 118. I love Canada and have visited both coastal provinces many times. I live in Maine. Lately, I have wished I lived in Canada. Story 119. As a Canadian, I think that while we are not perfect and there are some things I would change if I could, I am extremely grateful to wake up every day feeling freedom and safety. Story 120. I do not know. I grew up proud. Military service is in my family. I lived on many of the bases. I loved being a kid in such a time. Now, the cost of living does not make sense. Healthcare has deteriorated to almost non-existent. People may argue this, but I have seen family members and friends die while waiting for healthcare. Crime does not seem to be punished. I do not know. I am conflicted. I would say I am conflicted. Story 121. Happy to live in such a beautiful country. Sure, it is not perfect, but what country is? I would like it to be better, but I am glad it is not as bad as other places. Story 122. I feel a lot of pride toward the people living here, our communities, the land we have, and how beautiful it all is, but not so much toward our provincial and federal governments. Story 123. As a British person who immigrated to Canada, I love it here. Rolling farmland, wooden forts, native sites, and big mountains. Story 124. I've taken 2 trips to Canada. One to Toronto 7 years ago, and one to Montreal last year. The first was during New Year's. I froze myself silly. The second was an opportunity to learn more and understand the history, culture, people, and politics. I walked around possibly too much, but it was an amazing experience. I think Canada can be really cold and warm, referring to the people. Story 125. I lived in Sitka, Alaska for a bit and traveled around Canada. Beautiful country, beautiful people. I love Canada. Story 126. Looking at the difficult situation down south, and I am so happy I am Canadian. Also, The Little Hobo and today's special. Story 127. I do not feel proud of my country, which has failed everyone. The liberal politicians over the past 10 years have diminished our quality of life so much that people here are constantly considering leaving. Story 128. I have a real love-hate relationship with my country. On one hand, I think Canada has much going for it. Beautiful scenery, decent people, few enemies, good friendships, a relatively solid economy, great outlets for art, and a unique confederation of cultures. On the other hand, I have never felt more like an alien in my own country lately. My beliefs have never been less represented. My interests have never been more suppressed. That being said, in the grand scheme of things, I am kind of irrelevant. So my concerns do not really matter. Canadians seem to want things this way, and if people like me are eventually forced away, that is just democracy. I can accept and understand that. Honestly, I think Canada is still high up there on the scale as far as countries go. Story 129. Memories are good. I think of good friends I had who were from Canada, a trip we made through the Canadian Rocky Mountain parks, and the great time I had in Ontario for a wedding. Wonderful, friendly people. Of course, these days, even though I totally disagree with it, I am still utterly ashamed of the United States' betrayal of Canada this year. It was an incomprehensible turnaround. So, good memories but bad feelings. Primarily, at the moment, I feel guilt. Story 130. I am not Canadian, but I happened to be in Canada on Canada Day this year. Everyone wearing their Canada gear was pretty amazing. Everyone here is very friendly. Many people were saying, "Happy Canada Day." You can see the pride everywhere. I am happy that I was able to experience it. Story 131. I have very conflicting thoughts on Canada. On one hand, it is my home. I love it here and never want to leave. On the other hand, the horrific things that were done to Indigenous people, some of which have not even been acknowledged or apologized for, make me disappointed to be Canadian. Story 132. It is a good day to remember. Remember that Canada is a country built on imperialism. It is a country built on the genocide of First Nations, Acadians, and Métis people. It is built on the appropriation of French-Canadian culture and symbols. A country that keeps its ties with the monarch to this day, the greatest symbol of imperialism in the world that destroyed most cultures globally. Story 133. Hello, I was going to comment about one gripe concerning our internal state of affairs, but the pride we are showing in this thread, despite our gripes because we all have them, is so overwhelming that I hope we can keep the positive and optimistic vibe going for as long as we can. Does not get much more Canadian than that. Story 134. Kids in the hall. I love our wacky, polite northern neighbors and pray for a time in the near future when we can all live together in harmony again. Love you, Canada. Story 135. I think of the cold and snow, friendly people, and maple syrup. Sorry, I know those are just stereotypes. I have been there twice and it held up anyway. Story 136. I am not very patriotic, but I believe Canada is one of the better countries to live in. Certainly, there are better ones, but I am happy to have been born here. Story 137. We are not perfect, but I feel we are trying our best given the current political climate and our neighbors exiting. I wish our Indigenous communities had more say in the decision-making in this country. Story 138. I mostly think of Rush, one of my favorite bands. However, lately, I also feel a sense of shame over the behavior of our president calling them our 51st state and other such nonsense. Story 139. As many others have said, it is not without its problems, but I do not think there is another country on earth I would rather live in Canada. Story 140. After visiting multiple cities around the world and observing people, I am very thankful to be Canadian. Story 141. First thought. On Gene Simmons' reality show, Shannon in Saskatchewan was riding a horse in deep snow. How astonishingly beautiful it was. Then there is the crazy man from Toronto who appeared on Tosh Zero. Open spaces and truly pleasant thoughts about our great friend, Canada. Story 142. I went to Canada a few years ago and loved it. Beautiful scenery and really nice people. I hope to go back to a different area in the future. When I think of Canada, I think of mile upon mile of autumn color and maple syrup. Story 143. Love Canada, but I genuinely feel like we need someone to tell us to get our finances in order. Respectfully. Story 144. I love going to Canada for a visit. The people are warm and friendly, and the scenery is magnificent. I am embarrassed and ashamed of what Donald Trump has done to our country, to Canada, and to the world. We are supporting Canada by spending our United States dollars on a 2-week vacation in the Canadian Rockies this fall. Story 145. I reflect on where I could have been born versus being born in Canada and feel incredibly grateful. It would have been very challenging if I had been born in Asia. As I get older, I want to do more for my country. There is no shortage of areas to improve, and I truly believe if enough people share the same attitude, we can improve Canada not just for our generation but create a lasting legacy for our children and their children. I just need a few $billion for the big ideas. This will take some time. In short, Canada is a land of opportunity because there is a great deal of potential to unlock. I am excited and would work very hard to make this happen if I had the money. I love this country. Story 146. I think of the electronic music duo Boards of Canada, who are Scottish. So apparently, I do not think about Canada so frequently. Story 147. Disappointed and disillusioned. When I think of the old Canada, smiling faces, penicillin, Canada Arm, Can-Do Reactor, Bata, IC-182, Hyundai Pony. Story 148. Love Canada. 2 things always come to mind. 1. When I was in the United States Army, we did a joint training exercise with the Canadians. The first night out there, we woke up the next morning in what had turned into a brand new lake. Trailer Park Boys is an absolute classic. I cannot get enough of that show. Story 149. Missed this yesterday. I feel so blessed to live here on the prairies. The freedom and the beauty of our country are incredible. Now that we are old and ill, I am very grateful for the medical system. Story 150. Missed this yesterday. I feel so blessed to live here on the prairies. The freedom and the beauty of our country are wonderful. Now that we are older and ill, I am very grateful for the medical system. Story 151. Missed this yesterday. I feel so blessed to live here on the prairies. The freedom and the beauty of our country are incredible. Now that we are older and ill, we are very grateful for the medical system. Story 152. Missed this yesterday. I feel so blessed to live here on the prairies. The freedom and the beauty of our country are wonderful. And now that we are older and ill, I am very grateful for the medical system. Story 153. Kindness, honesty, understanding, nonviolence, and being a good neighbor. I wish I could say that about America. I live in Utah. Story 154. Love Canada. We visit Victoria and Vancouver frequently and always have a nice time. Montreal, however, is not enjoyable. Story 155. Used to be grateful. Now I am just scared. I used to think of politeness, safety, openness, and tolerance. Now all I can think of is that it only takes one wrong person to figure out who I am, and my life is critically in danger. Story 156. Growing up in South Florida in the 1970s, I knew that if the license plate said Quebec, they were not good at driving. That's what my parents said. Going down to the beach in January when it was a chilly 64 degrees, we always knew there would be Canadians in Speedos. Canadians are brave. That water is very cold. As an adult, I would like to visit Canada before I die. The people seem to be really nice. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.